Hi, welcome to today's T-Splines webinar, modeling a water gun as an unscripted demo. My name is Matt Cederberg. I'm the CEO of T-Splines, and I'll be your host today, along with Kyle Houchens, who will actually be doing the modeling. Now, the purpose of today's webinar is that even though T-Splines greatly simplifies organic modeling in Rhino and SolidWorks, if you're used to modeling with NURBS in Rhino or other CAD programs, it can take a different way of thinking to take full advantage of T-Splines, and sometimes learning new ways of doing things can be daunting. Learning T-Splines is kind of like learning how to do surface modeling if you've only ever done solid modeling. It gives you a lot of freedom, but the constraints are different from what you might be used to. So to expose you to how an experienced T-Splines modeler thinks while he models, we decided to put on this unscripted webinar. And so in this webinar, T-Splines authorized trainer Kyle Houchens will model an entire water gun in T-Splines starting from a sketch. In approximately 60 minutes, he'll go from a blank CAD file to producing multiple design concepts without following a script and without having ever even modeled this design before. That is, unless he got nervous last night and did a dry run. Since Kyle will not have modeled this before, he will make some mistakes during the webinar. And where much of the value will come from during watching this webinar is seeing him talk through his strategy, including fixing those mistakes. We hope that by observing Kyle's real experience in modeling with T-Splines, you'll be able to overcome hurdles in your own T-Splines projects, all of which are also unscripted. So we're a little bit unsure about the timing of this. So if Kyle goes over 60 minutes before he gets to his first concept, then we'll give all attendees a coupon for $25 off a copy of T-Splines for Rhino. If he goes over 75 minutes before his first concept, then we'll give out a $50 coupon. If Kyle fails and does not have a full concept in 90 minutes, then he will buy Super Soakers for 10 teenage boys in Oakdale, California, let them blast him at point-blank range, and put the whole event up on YouTube. So how will we decide if he is done? Well, you, the audience, will vote on it with a poll in the webinar. So with that, let's just talk through a little bit of housekeeping. All attendees are muted, but we do rely on your participation during the webinar. We have some T-Splines staff here, including myself, who will be typing back answers to your questions during the webinar. Kyle might move more quickly throughout this webinar than others since he doesn't want to get attacked by teenagers with water guns. So if he moves too quickly for you, or if you have any questions about which commands he used or why, please type in. We'll type back answers to you and it won't disrupt the flow of the webinar. The last webinar that we did, we were typing probably continually throughout the whole webinar, and we love that. We think it really enhances to have that back channel discussion. If you'd rather tweet, please do that. We are at T-Splines or the T-Splines hashtag. We will answer you there as well. And yes, this webinar will be recorded. So with that, let me introduce Kyle. Kyle Houchens has modeled over 1,000 models for production, mainly in the toy and entertainment industries. He's been a T-Splines user since 2009, and he's the owner of The Outside Digital Art and Design. He is available for consulting or custom modeling jobs. We use him a lot ourselves, so we can vouch for his work, and you can reach him at kyle@gototheoutside.com. So with that, let me turn the time over to Kyle. And I only took 6 minutes, Kyle, so you have 54 left.
Excellent. All right. Screen showing?
Yes, you're good.
You see my screen there? Excellent. Okay. Thanks for coming, everybody. Like Matt said, my aim here is gonna be doing the demo, and I'm gonna let Matt and his crew there answer the questions. I'm gonna try and explain what I'm doing and my thought process behind it, but I'm not gonna do every button click like I've done with a lot of the demos in the past. So. With that, let's go ahead and get started. I didn't cheat and model this before, so we are going to do this live from scratch. I did the sketch about a week ago, gave it to Matt, and used it for promotion, and then I really wanted to demo this live just so you guys see every roadblock that I run into when I'm typically modeling a project. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got here. We've got a couple of elements. We've got this is kind of a piece up here, the sight, the barrel, and the feeder tube down here elements. We have this slider pump handle. We have a tank. We have a hose with some little knurly knobs on here, kind of a base unit, and then a grip with a trigger guard and stuff like that. So instead of trying to do this as one complete T-Splines model, which would not be the way that you'd do this if you did it as a NURBS model, we're going to break it up into a couple of different elements and then let those objects intersect with the intention of that. Ideally, what you would do is use T-Splines for what T-Splines does best, which is modeling the organic stuff, and then finish the detailing out in NURBS. For this particular demo, I'm not planning on doing the detailing in NURBS. I'm going to get this to the point where all of the T-Splines work is done so that you can see that, with the assumption that everybody here is competent in Rhino and would understand, Booleaning parts together and fillets and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and jump into this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to attack the easy stuff, and obviously that would be the barrels. And I'm going to start with a single cylinder, and I'm going to nail this down at 0, and we'll just drag out something to get started. And rotate this. And I'm going to double click this so I get a constraint, scale it to about the right size, move it into position, and then I'm going to use the edge rings on the front and the back of this thing to create the rest of my parts. Now I could extrude this, or I could revolve this, but I find that this is a really fast way to get forms on stuff, and I'm just alt dragging using the scale and translate manipulators to get these shapes here. And we'll go about there, and then scale this. And you can see how you can just kind of stretch a shape out of nothing. And it looks like my sketching skills let me down a little bit when I missed my symmetry here, so I'm not going to sweat that. I'm just going to go with this. And again, just switching back between the alt drag for moving stuff and alt scale for scaling stuff. And in this case, I'm going to roll this over. You'll notice that I put an edge here, which allowed me to get that nice bend. Grab this end here, alt scale into the center twice, alt scale back, and we've got our barrel. Go back here, and I'm going to alt drag out a little bit and scale it to start getting the flare there. Alt drag out again and scale it. And then maybe alt drag out again and scale it one more time. And it looks like that's kind of blowing out the constraints of what my original done was, so maybe I'll shrink these just a little bit. Like that. Shrink that. And then I think I want something that's going to come back in here, so I'm just going to alt drag back in here. I'm going to imagine that this is some kind of tank or something like that. And I'm going to close this up, and I'm going to do that just with the fill hole. tool. And then at some point I may want to introduce some symmetry into this, so I'm going to insert a point. I'm going to snap it here and snap it here just to split that up into two faces. And maybe I'll just go, maybe I'll go across here too, just for the heck of it. That gives a nice kind of topological end there. I've got a point here that I can mess with to change that end condition. And if I don't like that, I can always delete those edges and get that to round out. Move this guy up so it lines up with there. And that way I've got a nice topology layout. I can apply symmetry to this if I want to at a certain point, but I think we're pretty good in the way that we move there. So that's the barrel. To get the little sub-barrel underneath it, I'm going to use the duplicate faces command. And I'm just going to grab a couple of faces here. I'm going to slide these down. I'm going to scale them until they match the diameter. I'm scaling in 3D here, so I know I'm still circular. Move it back to here. Again, I'm just going to grab the edges, and I'm going to alt drag, just add some more edges in here. I got a little corner here, so I'm going to alt drag once, twice, 3 times, and then I'm going to bend this guy. And I'm going to bend, use my C-plane disk, alt C-plane, to get that to turn the corner, and do that one more time. I'm just going to drag that up into there. And I'm going to adjust this guy a little bit. So I don't like how that corner is looking. And I may need to scale this thing just a hair just to get that to unkink. There we go. All right, so we got that. Come down here and get this edge. Again, you know, as of now, I've only used like 2 tools or 3 tools. So, you know, I'm just alt scaling, alt dragging, and then scaling and dragging. You know, alt to add the geometry and just the translators to move that. So I'm just going to throw that in there. We've got those 2 sections. So I'm going to go after all the easy gets on this so far, and we will throw, let's see, it's going to the front or rear view, doesn't matter. We're not in the origin. That's not good. Let me reset my origin on my plane here. That's not right. I want that centered there, so I should be on my origin. Just checking the top view here real quick, make sure that we're lined up. Yeah, okay, that's better. The way I did that was I just reset the set C-plane origin using the Rhino tool up at the top there. Alrighty, so now we should be lined back up again. Let's address this thing because again it's an easy get, and I'm going to do that again with a primitive. I'm going to use a torus, and I'm going to set that at 0 just so I know, oops, so that I know that I'm set at 0. Drag out something like that. Pick this object, slide it, come here, slide you up, and let's go find it, it's back here. It's up. I'm going to scale it so that it matches my top and bottom. And then I need to add a couple of edges in here to get this shape. So I'm just going to insert edge. Insert edge simple. I'm going to do it both sides. I'm going to just throw one in there. And I'm going to drag these out like that. Drag these out like that. Scale this one down. And we should have a sight of some sort. Now this thing is a little fat, not very sight-like, so I'm going to grab this center ring and I'm just going to scale it up. And then I probably need to add one or two more edges in here because I want to put like a little barrel sight or something in there. So I'm going to insert two edges on either side of this guy. That'll also tighten that up a little bit, and it gives me some more geometry to work with. So I'm going to bridge between the top and the bottom ones here, and it's a little off kilter. I can always fix that later, but I'm just going to bridge between these. I'm going to use 3 faces because that's going to give me 2 edges with a center edge, and that will allow me to do this like that. And then I'm going to grab this edge ring. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to scale that. I'm going to move the manipulator and I'm going to scale it back up a little bit so it digs out of there. Actually, I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to move these edges up. Let me straighten this thing out now because it's kind of wonked. So I'm going to pick the whole object. I'm going to rotate. I'm just going to eyeball this for now. Can always get precise later if I need to. So I'm just going to move this down, move this one up, scale these in, scale these in, scale these in. That's a little too thin. Alright, so I have some sort of sight there, and then I can do a couple of things. I can either subdivide these 2 faces right here, which I think I probably will do in order to allow me to have geometry to pull out of here, or I could do a different piece of geometry knowing that I'm going to, Boolean those 2 together. But I think it would look kind of cool to have these all nice and blendy out of here. So I'm going to pick these 2 and I'm going to subdivide exact, which is going to add a whole bunch more geometry to this thing, but it's going to basically give me what I need in order to pull these things out of here. And I'm going to make the back one stronger and the front one a little weaker, and then I'm just going to alt drag those out, alt drag. Now I always do like a little extrusion first, because what that essentially does, if you think about this in NURBS terms, think about this as your fillet surface. So that first extrusion is essentially going to determine, how much control you have over that fillet, and then the rest, you can kind of go from there. So I'll grab these guys and these guys. I'm going to slide these back a little bit so that they're a little closer together. And I'm going to rotate them, snapping somewhere up in there, like that. A little bit of adjustment in here to get this transition to happen a little better. Let's take a look. And so far so good. Pretty happy with that. Maybe I will move these edges out a little bit just to get a little bit more strength in here. Like that. And this edge ring I can bring down to square that out a little bit more. Let's see if we're anywhere near what we were looking at before. Yeah, that's all right. I'm good with that. And this one down just so that I want to make sure that this corner is firmly buried inside this thing because I'm going to Boolean these two together when I'm done. Grab this edge. Slide these in a little bit. Here. And I can mess around with this transition. You know, this could be a design iteration of what, you know, how that all blends together. But let's shade this and take a look at what we're doing here. So that's pretty good. And I've got plenty of intersecting surface down in here that I can go in and Boolean this together when I'm done. That should fill it together nicely and all that kind of stuff. So let me just run a make uniform on this guy since I added some extrusions to it just to make sure everything is settled.
Kyle, I just want to jump in with a question at this point. So it looks like you're making this site as a different piece. How come you're not going to merge that into the rest of the T-spline?
Well, the biggest reason is because I want a nice sharp transition here, and I don't want to have to worry a whole lot about the topology. So ideally, you know, this thing is going to, if it's going to go to production and I'm going to deal with an engineer, I'm going to use TS elements to translate this T-Splines model into SolidWorks. It's going to go into SolidWorks, and then my engineer is going to go ahead and do the filleting and the shelling and all that kind of stuff because SolidWorks does that really, really well. If I'm not working with an engineer and this is going to be a NURBS model that's going to go, you know, has to be an IGES output or a step output or something like that, I'm going to have to translate this to NURBS anyways, and then in that case I'm going to want to do the fillets because, you know, in this particular case, you know, I want to have the control of having these two things be separate parts and then manually going into fillets later.
Okay.
I could certainly merge these together, and the way that I would do that is I would subdivide, you know, these. Well, actually, I think I've got the right number of edges here, but I would remove these faces and I would remove these faces and I'd just bridge in between here and I'd get a nice blendy surface. But for this thing, I want a little bit more machined look between these two pieces, and so like I always say, I want to try and use the right tool for the right circumstance, and in that case, you know, I would Boolean these together. And
okay,
but,
yeah,
but you certainly could.
Yeah, and I guess I just wanted to bring up that point as well, that with a lot of this, Kyle will be doing extrusions and bridges and blending to get nice smooth flow between the different parts, but you don't always want that between different parts. So
yeah.
So leaving those as two separate parts and then getting an exact fillet radius going between those, I mean, there's a lot of times where that's exactly what you want to do. So
yeah. Yeah, and you know, there's a real trap when you're doing this stuff. I'm going to keep modeling while I'm talking here. I'm going to run out of time. But there's a real trap in, I'm using the quad ball for the tank. I'm going to make the tank next. There's a real trap of you've got T-Splines and it's this great shiny new tool, and you think that you should use it for everything. Well, that's great, and you know, I'm sure my T-Splines brothers here would love for you to use T-Splines for absolutely everything, but it's really, you know, the logic is that T-Splines is not necessarily intended to be a standalone modeler. However, it's a very good one. It really functions best as a turbocharger for, you know, what's really already an awesome modeling tool, which is Rhino. So don't fall into the trap of walking into a model shop and trying to build a model with nothing but a sander and a drill press. You know, you've got a table saw, you've got you've got grinders, you've got all the other stuff that you need to build a model. Use it, because you're going to ultimately end up with a better model than you would have had you, you know, just tried to force it into one tool. There's no reason to do that, because, you know, each tool has its purpose, and you know, I'm a big believer in if you need to, beg, borrow, and steal whatever tools you need to do to get your job done, do it. It just, T-Splines happens to be a really, really effective tool for, for this type of modeling. On the other hand, it doesn't do fillets very well. So if you want something that has to be a mechanical fillet, then, by all means, just intersect the stuff and do it in Rhino. That just infinitely makes more sense than trying to beat your head against trying to figure out how to get the topology to lay down perfectly in T-Splines. In this demo, the emphasis is kind of on speed and how you really want to do things quickly. And in that case, it's much faster to just do a couple of intersecting surfaces and Boolean them together than it is to try and work out everything perfectly in T-Splines. So you could certainly do it, but it's probably not the most efficient use of your time. And for my business, I quote by the job, so the faster I do something, the more money per hour I make, and that's basically my thing. I always do it that way so that my clients know what they're going to be paying up front, and then it's up to me to work as efficiently as possible. So I am a big proponent in conceptually lying, cheating, and stealing to get everything, to get stuff done as quickly as possible. This tank, I just basically took a quad ball, I subdivided it a little bit, and I'm just squishing points around a little bit until I get the shape that I want. And I used a quad ball versus a typical sphere because the topology on this was laid out a little nicer for that. Quad ball was something that was added in a fairly recent release. I want to say I think it was a version 3 tool, if I'm not mistaken, Matt. And it's great for all sorts of stuff like this. So, all right, so we're 23 minutes in, and we've got only a couple parts left to go here. I think we're in good shape. All right. Save, since I don't have my typical layer stack to fall back on. All right, so we've gotten a lot of the easy gets out of the way. Let's take a look at some of the other bits and pieces. Like, let's jump into the grip, because this is an interesting piece, and it's actually fairly complicated, but it's actually fairly complicated shape, but actually it's pretty easy to do. And I'm just going to start with some curves. These are just typical NURBS curves, and I'm just going to outline this thing roughly, and then where my thumb piece is going to be, I'm going to outline that in there like that. Now these are all flat. These are just dead flat. This is a paper doll. I'm a big proponent of paper doll modeling if you've seen any of my other demos. So the biggest thing that I want to do is I want to use the Rhino rebuild command to make sure that these have the same number of points. And it's saying 14. I do want them to be degree 3, so I'm going to preview that and just see. That's good enough for government work. I can mess around with this a little bit and see, sometimes it'll take out some of my caffeinated hand jitters if I drop the point count a little bit. And you don't want to get nutty with this. You don't want 1,000,000 points in here, but you also don't want it, we're 0.1 away. So I think 12 seems like a good compromise, so I'm going to go ahead and buy off on that. And then I'm going to use the T-Splines loft command, and I'll do something crazy and just show it in here from the menu. We're going to just do the loft command. And it's screwed up the order of the curves. It's gone from 1 to 2 to 3. So I'm going to move these around until it is lining up the way I want, and I'm going to say that's okay. And we'll go here, and you'll notice that, again, it's still a flat pattern, but my topology is lined up so that all I need to do is, let me get rid of my curves here, is this is an edge loop now. Come back here. This is an edge loop now that I can pull, and my form starts showing up. So basically all I need to do is just start messing around with this thing and adding or deleting edges to get this out. Now you'll notice something that's going on here. Check this out. See this return right here, and it's really obvious the more I pull this thing out. Burp. See this curve right here? That's not what I want. I actually want this inflecting tangent going towards the other direction. What that means is, if I turn these handles on, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but if I go to my display and I turn on all my tangency handles, if I go to my verts, these are tangency handles, these extra little things here, and if I pick all of those, you'll notice that I can mess with how that surface comes in and out of its zero tangency. If I just select those things and delete them, you'll notice that they reset back to a non-screwing up my surface state, which is what we want. I think that's actually the technical term for that. I'm going to do the same thing there. I'm going to select all those and just delete them, and you'll notice that now I'm starting to get some nice pillowy forms. So let's pull this thing out a little bit, and I'm going to go back to my tools and shut those tangency handles off because it's the easiest thing in the world to screw those up when you pick them unintentionally. So I'm going to pull this thing off my center line. I'm going to mirror it using just the Rhino Mirror command. I'm going to go to the top view. Go 0, boop. Go back to perspective, and I'm just going to connect these together. Now I can do one of two things. I can just weld these as they sit. I can just turn on T-Splines. I can just merge these edges as they sit, which actually appears to be working fairly well. So let's or we can just forget about what else I was going to talk about. Okay, that did not do what I wanted it to do. If you notice, I lost this front edge. So that's probably a bad idea. So at this point, then what I want to do is I'm going to bridge. And I'm just going to bridge these two edges together. And I'm going to use two edges because I want to keep this edge and I want to keep this edge, and I need a center point so that obviously I can put some symmetry on it at some point. So I'm going to change my segments to 2, and you'll notice that my handle comes together fairly nicely. So let's go to the front view, and let's just move this thing around a little bit. Something like that. Fairly complicated shape, fairly easy way to make it. Take that, NURBS. All right. This point here needs to come down a little bit. I'm not going to get too nutty with this because I think it's pretty close to describing the form that I was thinking of, and I love designing this way because I'll do a sketch just as kind of a little conversation with myself. Self, what are we going to design today? And then and a lot of times what I'll end up doing is I'll end up, essentially at some point kind of scrapping the sketch, because I will actually see stuff show up in 3D that I wasn't originally seeing when I was sketching it. And to me, that's really kind of an exciting. Let me throw some symmetry on this so I quit wasting so much time. So I'm going to pick this thing, I'm going to put some axial symmetry on it. I'm going to discover it just by selecting the center line here. I get a nice green line transferring all the way through it. And now I can stop being such an idiot and move this stuff around symmetrically. And if we go to TS Shiny, you can really see how this stuff starts to line up, and go in and start making some adjustments. Now, in this case, you'll notice if I go back and forth to box mode, see how my points aren't moving? My points are right where they're supposed to be. In this case, it may be a little easier to edit this thing if my points were actually on the surface. So I'm going to go to my display, and I'm going to display my control points right on the surface. And they're going to jump to actually where the intersections are. And then that allows me to have a little bit closer direct input as to what I'm doing here. And I want to fatten this up a little bit. I have to be careful not to let my designer nerd instincts take over and blow my time budget here, but unfortunately there is no cure for designer nerdism. All right. Now, let's unshade this and take a look at it. There's an opportunity here to use this isoparam as the basis for this hilt down here. I think that's the actual term for it. I'm not a gun guy, but so I overshot this a little bit, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab these edges and delete them. And then I'm going to adjust this to match my line here. And then let's go and just Alt-drag and Alt-scale this hilt out to get what we need. So I'm going to pick this whole thing, I'm going to scale it, Alt-scale out, Alt-scale out. Go to my front view. Alt-scale down, Alt-scale down. That'll work. Let's make a couple of adjustments here. Just get a little closer. Pull these guys around. Like that. This one. So you can see how having the points on the surface is nice when you're kind of digging around for a form there. The only issue is when you do go into box mode, your points jump, so sometimes there's a little, you know, unpredictability as to where your points are going to lie, but in this case I'm pretty comfortable with where everything's supposed to be. So, all right, what are we doing? All right, so let's close the bottom of this up, and we're just going to do that by scaling, Alt-scale, 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 and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to pick this, and I'm going to bridge between the two of them using 2 segments. It's going to blow up on me because I bridged with symmetry on. All I have to do to fix that is select these points and weld them. What happened here was, since I bridged with symmetry on, it bridged from here to here, and then it also bridged from here to here. So if I select this, there'll actually be 2 verts here, because there's actually 4 faces stacked on top of each other. All I have to do to collapse those is just select them and hit the Z key, and that welds them together. And then I'm going to pre-pick these and weld them, pre-pick these and weld them, and everything goes back to being dandy. And let's go out of that. That's actually got kind of a cool form. I wasn't really expecting that to look like that, but let's adjust this just a little bit because that's got kind of a weird kick up in the back there. little potato chippy on the bottom there, so let's take that out. All right, let's TS shiny that and just see how we're looking. All right, that's fairly cool. And if I want to tighten this edge up, I can just insert an edge in here, but I'm pretty comfortable with the way that works. Actually, I can just move this one down too, like that. All righty, let's get this stuff. Select all of that, toggle shade. Alrighty, so I need to pull the trigger guard out of this, and this is a case where, again, I could make this a separate piece, but I've got an interesting topology opportunity right here in the fact that there happens to be a face just begging for this. So I'm going to pick these two, and I'm going to alt drag once, alt drag again, alt drag again. I'm going to open up the end of this thing, and I'm going to run make uniform, because this is, anytime you see a situation like this where it's all pinchy nasty, just run make uniform, which is this one in the utilities. Oops. And it'll straighten that back out. And you'll notice that my edge is a little cupped here. I'm going to straighten that out just by selecting the whole edge, hitting the T command, recentering the gumball, and then scaling in one direction. You'll notice that it straightens right out. I can overdo it, but I can straighten that right out. I'm going to scale these guys a little bit because they're a little big. Everybody feeling this so far? Is this working out for everybody? Now, I need to come around the corner here, and I could scale, scale, rotate, 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 but I can also do this, which is pretty cool. I'm going to move the rotate manipulator to about here, and I'm going to alt rotate. Oh, that's so good. And then I just keep going. One more. And I kind of missed with my pivot point there, but you get the drift. So again, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to let, I like this blend here. I like how that's happening. So I'm going to let that go, but I think I'd like to have a hard transition there. Now the only other thing that I noticed was I kind of missed my back here. So I can give this a shot just by coming in like this, and actually that worked fairly well. But not as much of a corner as I was hoping for, so I'm going to add one edge right here. Actually, I'm going to add one on both sides, and that should make a nice pointy corner there. And that's got a nice little thumb guard thing going on. Pasco's going to email me later and tell me how bad I slaughtered all the gun terms here. I'm assuming he's going to tell me finger rest thingy is not the correct term, but all right. So we're pretty good shape. Basically, all we need to do is get this NURBS thing in here, and it just so happens that I have a gigantic pile of clip art, and I have a file of NURBS, and I want to use, let's see, which one, NURBS 3. I'm going to import it. And if you guys aren't doing this, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you have a gigantic clip art file of stuff like this. It's it's stupid, quite frankly, to build this stuff over and over again. And having a legitimate clip art file is really something that you just need to have. I'm going to bend this using the Rhino bend tool. And I think I completely blew that. Let me try this again. There we go. This is a great tool. I love this tool. Get it and get in there. There we go. Now this is just a NURBS object, and everybody's going, "No, you didn't make it in T-Splines." Well, if you don't like it, do your own webinar. So I've got a nice nerdy flexy thing in there. And I'm going to scale it just a hair. And I'm just going to trim it off right here where it would penetrate. And I'm going to turn off a lot of its ISO curves because it's distracting. All right, let's check that out. All right, nice nerdy flex tube going on there. Which, let's go ahead and make these little knurlies. And these are actually kind of cool because we can use the Symmetry Tool for this. And I'm going to start with a torus, and I'm going to drag out, and I want them kind of fat so that I have some room to mess with them. And I need to subdivide this so that I've got some extra detail in here. And then I'm going to apply some symmetry to it. It's going to be radial. Oh my goodness, how many segments do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I've got 16 segments, right? 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 segments. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think I can get 8 segments. Let's try that. And what did I do? I think I screwed up. All right. All right. Symmetry, radial, discover. Duh. That's what I needed to do. All right. So root face is going to be this one, and then I want to go 1, 2, 3 to here. Nope. Discover. All right. There we go. Discover. And I'm going to go 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. This one. There we go. So that gave me 4 areas of symmetry, and that's not enough. So I'm going to do this again. Radial. I have to use this tool over every single time I do this. So I'm going to go 1, 2. There we go. So now I've got more faces in here. Now I can subdivide this again. No, I can't. Wah, wah. All right, let's do symmetry again. Discover. And I'm going to go 1. There. Nope.
What are you trying to do, Kyle?
Not look like an idiot, man. I am picking the wrong. My math is not.
Are you trying to do radial symmetry?
I'm trying to do radial symmetry. Here we go. Radial, discover, root face, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. This one. There we go. Ding, 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 ding. Now I can pull a face, and I get a nice nerdy flex. And I'm going to take out some of this detail because I don't need it now. this out a little bit. All right. Take this one out too. Move this one up. Delete. Nope. Get all that one. Delete. Move this out. And I've got way too much detail in here, so I'm just going to kill off some of this. There we go. It's a little softer. And I probably don't even need this one or this one. There we go. And maybe not. I'll keep those two. That gives me an option for scaling this up and down and getting a little flexy thing going on here. All right. Whew. Bullet dodged. All right, double click this, go 90, go to my front view. Whole thing needs to scale. Bring it down, move it, rotate it. Scale. I'm going to adjust this edge a little bit here. I'm hitting the L key, by the way, to select those whole loops. If I pick one edge and hit the L key, I get the whole thing. And that squares it up a little bit. There we go. That's fairly believable. All right. Cut and paste. Move this guy down here. Rotate by this edge. And something like that. All right. Let's see how we're doing. All right. Pretty good. All I got to do is build a trigger and a body, and we're out of here. So, trigger. Easiest thing in the world. I'm just going to take a single curve. I'll drag. 1, 2. I'm going to pick the whole thing, slide it out a little bit, top view, or front view, mirror, Rhino Mirror command. Stop it. All right, you. Hide everything but that. Bridge between these using 2 segments. Same thing. And I'm going to leave those hard for right now because look what happens if I fill this hole. Whoop. It's not necessarily what I want. I really want these to be hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this just as it sits and let it intersect. And then I can either Boolean this stuff in and it'll obviously cap itself, or I can Boolean subtract, or once I convert this to a Rhino surface, I can just run the cap command and that'll give me a nice hard edge on it. But I can get nutty with this thing and sculpt into it a little bit if I want to. Let me throw some symmetry on it so it happens on both sides. Axial, discover. So now if I pick this and insert an edge, don't want it both sides. And I'll do the same thing here. And then this allows me to push this in a little bit. That way I can get a little sculpty on that if I want to. All right, so let's look at this. Let's look at this thing because this is probably one of the more complicated pieces. And the way I'm going to start this, so I know it's centered over the barrel, is I'm just going to duplicate those faces and scale them. And then that way it allows me to be lazy and not have to use another primitive, but it also, I know that I'm centered over my barrel, which is good. Oops, come back here. All right, so let's look at the topology on this thing. And there's a little handly thing that sticks out of here, but it also has this kind of weird transition going on. And I'm not going to get that with the topology that I have going on right here. So I'm going to need to add some edges. So I'm going to pick this edge, and I'm going to do both sides because I need to get something kind of in here. And then, so let's see, probably, is that enough? Yeah. Probably need to move this edge forward to about there, this edge back here, and then I need an edge that comes up like this. And if I want that to roll correctly, I'm probably going to need another edge somewhere in here. So let me add another one. We'll do something like that. We can always pull it out later if I don't want to. So, all right. So let's start shoving this around so that it starts to do what we want it to do. And I'm going to do this in box mode because it's a little easier to visualize what is happening. And I'm going to push these guys over. I'm going to pull these forward. I'm going to pull these forward. And you can see how I'm starting to believe that I'm going to be able to get this to come out of here. Like that. Now,
so Kyle, I think the answer is probably pretty obvious right now, but the fact of the matter is that we're at 60 minutes.
Okay.
So we just need to go ahead and launch this poll. Does Kyle's water gun qualify as a full concept yet? Maybe we'll get some nice people out there, but if you say yes, he'll stop. So let's go ahead and I'll stop this now.
We're going to be here till like next Thursday.
Okay, here's the results. Actually, 40% of the people said you're done, Kyle. But
oh, yeah, I love you guys.
But you got to keep on going.
All right, excellent. So. Nero's thumb points down. All right. So I've got my topology flow is starting to happen here, but I don't have my transitions are not going to happen. If I look at this and analyze it, I've got the topology where I need it, but in order to get my transitions to start happening, I need more data here, right? Because you can't, if I make a corner in a NURBS model, right, and I turn my points on, I need, think of this as looking at a cross section through this thing. I gotta have a point, I gotta have a point, I gotta have a point, 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 point. Otherwise, you can't interpolate through that and make a corner. So if this has got to sink in right here, I need I need more data. So what I'm going to need to do, let's turn T-Splines back on, is take this edge and insert some edges on either side of that. And I can do something like that. Now, look what happens. I can grab this face loop. I think I've got something weird going on here. All right. Look what's happening here. If I pick this face, see how it's showing that it's covering this entire thing? That means that there's a face looped on top of itself. So let's untie that just by pulling this out. Now let's double check and make sure. That's better. In this situation, what happened is basically like a sock turned inside out. This is turned up on top of each other. If I toggle this smooth, notice how it's got this kind of weird rolled edge on it. That's a good indicator that there's something screwy. So let's just untie this, and all you have to do to untie it is just do this. Now if I toggle smooth, it behaves as you would expect. But now that I have this topology the way that I want it, watch what I can do. I can grab these faces and these faces. Oops. Let's do this one first because that's the toughest one to get, and then the rest of these we can drag select. All right. I can move my manipulator to here, and then I can scale these. And Viola, there's my transition starts to show up. So now that my transition's here, I can screw with it and start seeing, if I pull in, it gets sharper. If I go out, it gets weaker. I can now scale this by moving my manipulator up here. And I can really get that to show up. And it fades out nicely. And if I really want it to fade out, I start doing things like this, just going off detail. If I kill this one, it fades off earlier, but I think that works nicely. Now, I may not even need this one. Let's see what happens. Yeah, actually, I kind of like that better. Yeah, let's get rid of it. Can always put it back if I have to. Now, same thing up here. Notice we've got our folded sock syndrome going on. If I go back to box mode and I grab a face, notice how it's overlapping. That's always going to be a bad scenario, so let's just untie that. Let's check it again. Now we're good. Same thing here. I need an edge in order to get this transition to happen in and out. And let's just go back to my sketch and see. Yeah, I'm showing that's kind of bulging out a little bit. So instead of adding all those edges, let's just add one here. Excuse me. And I'm going to turn both sides off because I want it to be out here. And now I can grab these, move them down, and scale them out. Let's shade that and toggle smooth. So now we're starting to get our detail out of there. Pulling the handle out, if you refer to, is a hairdryer video on the web, Matt?
Yeah, that's part of the T-Splines starter guide we just put up.
Okay. The hairdryer video, this is hairdryer video right here. This is like how you make the hairdryer handle. We're just alt dragging. And you'll notice we have these pinchy isoparams again, so we fix that with the make uniform. Always a good idea when you extrude something to do that. And I'm going to throw some symmetry on this so that I don't have to keep doing this over and over again. And my green line goes all the way around. If it doesn't, then you've got a break in the surface somewhere or a overlapping something or other. and you need to fix it. I've got a line down the middle, so that gives me a perfect opportunity to get some crown because it's going to interpolate through there. So I've got a nice handle there. Let's go to the front view and adjust this a little bit. For those of you who are out there who are learning T-Splines, I sympathize with your potential frustration coming from a NURBS mindset. I share your pain, and I went through this. But once you get through and you get that first aha, I get how T-Splines wants me to think moment, hopefully stuff like this will help you get there. I have a feeling that once you start working this way, you're going to come to kind of the same realization that I did, which is, why in the world was I doing this any other way? Because the amount of form that you can generate and the amount of time is just, it's just not, there's nothing else out there like it. So if you're frustrated, trust me, stick with it. It'll click, and it's not because Matt's a mean person or there's something broken in the software, which was always my first inclination. It's difficult to come from a NURBS mindset and get it right off the bat. Hopefully this stuff is helping. I need a point right here, so in order to get a point, I need an edge. And in order to need an edge, I have to add one, so I'm just adding one. And I don't have enough here, so I need to add one more. So I'm going to pick these guys. I'm going to add one more edge. I was able to just right-click and get that because it was the last tool I used. All right, I think we're getting close to a handle here. Let's spin this and take a look. So that's pretty cool. Let's add a little form to that. I'm going to pull these out just a little bit just to give these a little form. I'm going to pull these in, pull them at the same time. Again, since symmetry's on, you can mess with the highlights here. One of the coolest things about T-Splines is the fact that you can actually design the way that the light hits something. And if you're a highlight nerd like I am, it's really fun to come in and start finding highlights and stuff that you maybe didn't see when you were drawing this. I tend to think in highlights, which can be a problem in social situations, but T-Splines allows you to find that stuff fairly easily. And maybe let's fatten this up at the back a little bit. That's cool. All right, so I think we're in pretty good shape there. Let's roll the edge of this guy. Super simple, just Alt-Scale to roll the edge. Alt-Scale again to get a little bit of meat in there. Alt-Drag. Alt-Drag. And there's two ways I can do this. Let's go back a little bit. One more. One more. There we go. I think that's it. Two edges or one? One. All right. There's two ways I can do this. I can just thicken this thing if I need wall thickness, like if I was going to rapid prototype this. Actually, before I jump into that. Well, if I was going to rapid prototype this, I could just use the thicken command, and I can add wall thickness to it. You can crease the edges and all sorts of stuff like that. That's actually probably how I would handle this. And then I would split it up in NURBS and add, you know, any bosses or ribs or anything like that that I needed to add to it. But tighten that up a little bit. See, I can't help it. it's an affliction. All right. This one actually needs to be a little tighter, so I'm going to just pull this in a little bit. There you go. There it is. All right, that's what I was looking for. Not that. You, not you. There we go. All right. So let's pull the handle out of this thing, and I don't have enough geometry to do that. So I'm going to move this in a little bit. And this has got a little weird cuppy thing going on. Actually, that's okay. Never mind. I need one more edge off of this because I don't want to build this right into a corner. That's not gonna suit me well. So I'm going to add one more edge in here. And I probably should have continued this edge all the way around so that it gave me enough detail there. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do this just by, let's add an edge here. I'm going to add an edge, and this is going to blow the model up, by the way, when I do this, because these 2 points aren't connected. But all I have to do to fix that is just drag these and zip them together. So now I've got enough topology in here to make a handle. I've got enough topology in here to make, well, actually I need one more edge here. I'll drag out one more edge. All right. So now I've got enough topology in here to make a handle. So I'm going to pick, and these faces are kind of big for this handle, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go with that, and I'm going to use that as a fillet, a big fat fillet to go into those things. So I'm just going to scale or alt drag the handle out of here, and then before I get too far into this, I'm going to pick these edges, and I'm going to scale this in way in. And that gives me a really nice transition in there. And I'll do this one, do the same. I'm going to scale this one. Yikes, not like that. Yeehaw. All right, let's move this. There we go. All right, I'm going to open this thing because eventually these are going to touch, so I'm just going to kill that, turn this into an open edge. Same thing here. Delete that. And let's go in the front view a little bit and straighten this out so that it's not such a mess. Move my pivot point, scale this in. Same thing with this one. Oops. Move my pivot point, scale this in.
Kyle, I've got to interrupt one more time. We're up on 75 minutes. So
okay.
I've got another poll to launch. Is Kyle's water gun concept a full concept yet? So if you can just vote again so we can see where he's at. It looks like you're getting fewer yeses than last time.
I've slipped in the polls.
You've slipped. All right, let's go ahead and close this out.
All right.
All right, so expectations have grown since 15 minutes ago, Kyle.
I smell blood in the water, Matt.
Okay, you got 15 more minutes before you got some super soakers coming your way.
All right, it happens. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll drag this guy out. drag this up. And then I just need to come around this corner. And do some scaling, seriously. All right, and then I should, if I've done this correctly, 8 edges there. Ooh, 10 edges there. How do we get 10? Well, we'll just take 2 out. That's fine. Delete those. Now I should have 8 and 8, and I can pick this edge. Well, let's see. Let me just do this methodically. I'm going to weld these edges together. It's going to blow the model up. Weld those together. Didn't like that. Why didn't it like that? Well, it didn't like that because these edges are touching. So if I do this one and weld those two together, now it'll deal with that. And then the last one I'm going to have to weld using a point, because if I weld edges, there we go. So that completes the handle. I'm going to insert one more edge in here so that it allows me to pull out the corner. Adjust this. Adjust this. This edge got a little away from me. All right. So now I could shell this and get some wall thickness. So now that's a wall thickness part. Got my slider there. And all we need to do is make this piece here. And I import that from clip art. No. So this is a fairly simple part, and let me just hide everything else. Oops. This is a fairly rectilinear part, so I'm going to build this I'm going to just start with a curve, and I'm going to rebuild it to 8 points, and I'm going to alt drag. I need a corner here, so I'm going to alt drag 2 edges. Alt drag. And then one more for this. I need to be able to make this corner here, so I'm going to need one more edge here. And I'm probably going to need something there, but I'll deal with that later. Pull this back a little bit. down. All right, so basically all I need to do is take this thing and turn it into a brick, right? So I'm going to pick this and I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to grab the whole edge loop on this thing and I'm going to scale it. I'm going to alt scale out to add a row of edges and then just adjust it a little bit. And then I'm going to alt drag in to add another row of edges. I'm just going to run around the corner and make this thing into a box. Like that. And I've got some creasing going on here, which I don't want, so I'm going to just right-click on the crease command. Yeah, maybe I did want those. Let's slide that. Yeah, we'll deal with that later. That's fine. And let's check the top view, see how we're doing. Whoop, way overdid it. Set points to the Y, to 0. Oops, missed these. We'll symmetry this. Let's add some edges. And make this uniform real quick. We'll pull out this trigger guard down here. And pull out the little holders for the tank. Ooh. Move those up. Move this edge back. Oops. Where are you? There you are. If I want to get really fussy, I can add one more edge in here to sharpen this up. Same thing down here. I may want to sharpen this up a little bit, but pretty much, you know, this is where we start arguing over how close this is to done. There's that. Add one edge right in here. This. Let's turn everything else back on. And the only thing we need to do is a couple of adjustments to fit stuff up. Pull that in. And maybe shove this in. Oops. Now, at this point, this is where I would stop with T-Splines, and I would go into NURBS, and I would start Booleaning stuff together. I would add, you know, any screw bosses or wall thickness. Actually, I'd do the wall thickness in T-Splines just because the thicken command works so well. But this would be the point where I would jump out and start working in NURBS, because all of the form details and stuff are done, and basically I would now start getting in and nerding on the fillets and you know, doing that kind of stuff. But basically this to me would be where I would jump out of T-Splines and then get into the NURBS modeling. So how do we do, Matt?
You are you're at 1 minute under 90, but don't take my word for it. We need to. I do have one final poll to kind of see where we're at. So is this a concept yet? Let's see what we hear back. Leave this open for a few more seconds. Ted Carl says, soak him. All right.
I will remember you.
Let's close this out. It looks like you're off the hook, Kyle. So no need to outfit the neighborhood boys with water guns.
The problem is it would be my daughter's gymnastics team, and they're vicious.
But since it did take up as long as it did, then everyone that stayed through the end does qualify for a $50 coupon off buying a commercial copy of T-Splines. So, all right, everyone that's chiming with comments still wants to see you soaked, though, Kyle.
Well, then I get to keep your $50.
Okay, so being that we're at this point, though, I don't know what Kyle's time's like, but if I'm willing to stay around for another 10 minutes or so if anyone has any other questions or requests that they'd like to see on this model. Do you have a few minutes, Kyle?
I sure do, Matt.
Okay. So I think there's some questions about just some of the mechanical elements. So one question like, how is the trigger going to work, or maybe just seeing something converted to NURBS to see how you actually add the screw holes.
Sure. Well, here's a cool thing. If we look at this part right now, since we did add wall thickness to this, there's a couple of cool things about this. First of all, you'll notice that it does have an internal and external surface, and I did not take the time to specify a wall thickness, but if I had, you know, this would be the specified wall thickness. Now, if I convert this to NURBS, which is simply a matter of just, you know, a single button clicking here, this is now a NURBS polysurface, and if we look up here in the window here, you can see it's a NURBS polysurface. And let me get rid of some of the ISO curves because it's got a lot of ISO curves in it. But you'll notice that if I wire cut this thing, excuse me, it does have wall thickness, which is really great because if you're going to rapid prototype this thing, this will go to rapid prototyping all day long. So what I would do is I would convert this to NURBS. I would go to whatever view I was going to split this in. In this case, obviously my line of draw would be right down the center. And I just wire cut this. And split it into my two halves. And then it would simply be a matter of just, just like you would normally do, is to go in and start booleaning in some screw bosses and stuff like that. And we can do that real simple. I don't know if anybody's used the Rhino Rib command. This is actually kind of a really fairly awesome tool. Let's see if I can get it to work. So I can take a curve and drop it in here and run rib. And distance 0.15, and that's my boundary. And it drops a rib in here. So I can do that on both sides. So I could create my ribbing really simple just by running running. I don't think this is history enabled, but let's see. Nope. So you could rib the stink out of the inside of this thing and just go ahead and do that using the same curve, especially since you split it down the center line. You would just do this piece, hide this piece, and then use those curves to do it on the other side. In this case, since it's symmetrical, you could just do one side and flip it. And then your screw bosses and stuff, you just do the same way. You just go ahead and take a Rhino, whatever your thing is here, and just blow this out to here. And actually, let's try something. I don't even know if this is going to work. I'm going to be completely stoked if this works. Let's try to rib a circle.
Kyle, while you're jumping into that, I just wanted to throw out that we've set up just a really brief survey when you leave the webinar. We've never done a webinar like this before, so we're really interested in your feedback about what worked well and what you'd like to see in the future. So.
Color me giddy. That's awesome. You can rib both regular curves. I've never done that before. And stuff for screw bosses. So there's your ribs and screw bosses right there, kids. And then it would just be a matter of making an intersecting one, take this and scale it, make an intersecting one go the other way, and then punch a hole through it. But to be honest with you, if I was tasked with developing this entire model and giving it to a client, and they had to, and the job was to give them something that the designer could send to an RP machine, pick up from the RP machine, and put screws in it, I'd go through the trouble of doing all this kind of stuff. Obviously, I'd have to do this differently because this has got a slide. But typically, I would not do this stuff. I would do the wall thickness because that's just, it's a button click in T-Splines and it's so easy to do. But I would hand this over to the engineer without all the rest of this stuff done. I'd do some of the booleans and stuff like that so that I know that everything's going to connect the way that I want it to connect. But I would give it to an engineer, basically in a state that was easy for them to deal with. And ideally, if they're using SolidWorks, they could use TS Elements, or they could use, the upcoming SolidWorks plugin. And I could just give them these T-Splines parts. They could then dump these T-Splines parts right into their model tree and then do all the engineering off of this while still maintaining the editability of all of these individual bits and pieces. So the cool thing about this is, you can either take it and develop it all the way and have your deliverable be, a fully detailed part, or ideally you're working in a kind of a enlightened engineering department who is adopted this stuff, and you can give it to them. If you are not working with an enlightened engineering department, please enlighten them. This will make your life so much easier as a designer, especially on the consultant side of things. If you clue your engineering partners into the fact that there is T-Splines for SolidWorks, TS Elements already, TS for SolidWorks is coming. Matt, when?
Soon.
Soon. Okay. Soon. It's going to be a situation where this is going to be the thing that makes your life fantastic, because the engineers are going to no longer hate you. So that's pretty much how I would go through the process of detailing this. These two pieces here, I'd convert these to NURBS. Oops. I'd Boolean them together, and then I'd just do my filleting and stuff like I normally would.
Kyle, a couple final questions. One, someone was curious why you weren't saving very often.
Because T-Splines is so incredibly stable, I didn't need to save very often. Now, you know what? I have a really, really bad habit about that. I do have autosave set up, so hopefully autosave would have saved my butt. But yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years now, and I have a horrible habit of trusting software not to screw me. And unfortunately, it happens a lot. So you're absolutely right. I should have saved a lot. I did.
All right. And then another question we've got a few times. How long have you been using T-Splines? I don't know, 20 minutes. No. How long was this webinar? No, when did I originally abduct you, Matt? Yeah, I was trying to remember that. It's been a few years.
I abducted Matt from an airport on the way to a trade show and held him captive until he listened to all my demands. I don't recommend that as a negotiation strategy, by the way, but Matt very patiently listened to me, and here we are later. But now Matt's going to get abducted in every airport he gets to. But I want to say, what, 2 years, year and a half, something like that? Version 2, really, whenever the release date on version 2 was when I got into it, because the original discussion that Matt and I had was actually regarding how frustrated I was with version 1, and he smiled politely and said, just wait. And version 2 came out, and 99.9% of my problems went away, mostly because most of the problems were with me and not the software. But I think whenever version 2 came out, that's really when I jumped into it full blast. So.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a couple of years. So. Okay. So. And this is a good final just question for Mark. What program did you use before T-Splines?
Good grief. I started, believe it or not, with Strata Studio in 1988, 89, and then I went to Form Z, and then from Form Z I picked up Alias in 92, and I was level 3 Alias trained in 93, or actually level 3 Alias trained in 93. And no, I take that back. That was much later. 97, I picked up Alias, and I did Alias for a couple of years, and then I got into Rhino right around 2000, and then basically, transferred my entire workflow over to Rhino. Opened my consultancy in 2001, and I ran on Alias for a year in my original consultancy, and then I moved into Rhino. So I've used a lot of it. I also use ZBrush. I have Freeform here. I have ZBrush here. I have Alias here. I was a Geomagic user for a long time doing reverse engineering, and so I've broken a lot of software over the years.
Okay, well, good. Well, I think it's time for us to go to lunch in Utah, at least. Kyle's probably ready for some breakfast. And thanks everyone for coming. We did record this. We'll be getting it up on YouTube in the next day or so. We'll also be emailing everyone that coupon code that you got through for sticking out till the end with us. And thanks a lot for coming.
Thanks, guys.